Hey guys, Matt and Jacob from Evolve Fitness, and today we're going to talk about muscle activation. What we mean by this is everyone wants to build their muscle, and when they do, you have to think your muscle will only build as the quality of the contraction that you've got. What I mean by that, say you're trying to build biceps, but you've got a barbell and you're getting a bit of a swing on there. A lot of what we call a mechanical advantage, which means it's good, it's efficient for lifting that weight up, but you're using multiple muscles to get the job done and kind of losing sight of what the actual objective is. And the objective is to damage the bicep so that we can cause growth. So with that mechanical advantage and probably not a good contraction in the bicep, you're ultimately not going to damage much of that bicep tissue and cause that contraction, right?
Yeah, so like on mechanical advantage and disadvantage, obviously if we start talking sort of a bit more biomechanically and that, if you're putting a muscle at longer levers or shorter levers and things like that, that's when you're going to really start to increase the load or tension on the muscles without getting too scientific or anything. Let's just use the biceps for example. You know, if you're using the swing and things like that, but you're also, you know, not going through that full range, using your legs to stop it and hinging and all that sort of stuff, that lever is never fully extending, so you're never putting like maximal tension and strain on the muscle because you're shortening the lever the whole time. Vice versa, like you said, if you want to put it at a mechanical disadvantage and go long lever lengths where it's really got to struggle from a greater distance, longer range of motion, things like that, obviously a lot more work has to be done, a lot more stress on that particular area.
Yep, and it's like, so for example, keeping to that bicep because it's nice and easy. If you've got, say if I turn sideways onto this camera here, the center of mass runs down your body. My elbows are back past the center of mass and I'm hinging off my shoulder. So if I'm holding a weight down here, it's like holding shopping bags. There's not really much stimulation. But if I bring my elbows in front of my body, I can get tension in the bicep with a lengthened limb. Okay, the next problem is though, if I curl that bicep up, and now from here, I'm now hinging back off my shoulder. I'm skeletally loading again. But if I rotate about 2 degrees forward to here, now I don't have underneath support, so the bicep's activated. So really, for example, if you're trying to cause hypertrophy or damage within a bicep, you should have those elbows in front and be driving up, rotating slightly forward, so that you don't get that rest at the top, and slowly down, keeping it completely extended in front of your body to keep that muscle contracted the entire time. Because here's the thing, you have to have that time and attention. And also, your bicep is, your biceps supinates your hand, turns your hand over. So the more your hand's over, the more of a contraction you're going to get. So basically, the harder contraction, the more intensity you're going to get a contraction in that muscle, obviously.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think the important thing here is to understand that Matt's not saying bicep curl like that every single time, unless that's your focus. And that's where your focus is important. If your focus is to build the bicep, 100%, that's the most efficient way to load just the bicep and particular fibers of the bicep. But if you're, if you're going to use, say, a compound movement where you want to bring in more than one muscle and several joints and things like that, obviously then your focus is changing. So I think it's important to just understand that we're talking about the focus being isolating a particular muscle, and then in the case of the bicep, making it as mechanically disadvantaged as possible, so it has to do the maximum amount of work.
Absolutely. It's like, so the difference is kind of like strength and hypertrophy. The way I've sort of like come up with this, I think I saw it somewhere, I can't remember, is that imagine trying to open an iron door. As you try to open that door, you realize you haven't got enough strength, or it needs a bit more power. So you're going to drive your legs into the ground. You're going to start recruiting more muscles in your body to open that door. You might even get leverage by putting your hand up on the wall to drive it open. This is strength. This is efficiency. This is mechanical advantage. I'm using leverage, I'm using multiple muscles. But now if I get that same door and I place my body so that I can only pull it open with my bicep or certain muscles that I'm trying to hit, I've purposefully given my body a mechanical disadvantage to try and target those certain muscles. So the weight that I can lift goes down, but the damage in that target muscle goes up.
Absolutely. And I think, again, coming back to the focus, depending on whether you're an athlete, bodybuilder, like everyone's going to have a different focus, and different muscles, different joints are all going to be very, very different when we talk about how to isolate them and things like that. keeping with the bicep again, as Matt was saying, pronation, supination at the wrist. Okay, so like even just turning it like that, we'd have to change angles of the body in order to maximally load certain fibers, because we're going to have to, once we do this, obviously you can't hold the same sort of, I guess the same rules and principles for every single joint.
Absolutely. Like for an example, like to give you a bit of contrast, say a very commonly known movement is the bench press. And so if you're doing a bench press without thinking about it, if you just press up, most people push like this, they concave their chest and then should drive forward with their shoulders. So this is where you get more of your anterior delt activated. So a lot of people end up building their shoulders rather than their chest. But you pull those shoulder blades back and down, and now imagine if I break that bar in half, what would happen? That bar would fall out, right? But what we want is activation of the chest. The chest pulls your humerus across your body. So really, it should be shoulder blades back and down and pushing that bar in as hard as you can. Because what you've got is you've got an agonist and antagonist of your arm. So basically, as your bicep flexes, your tricep has to relax. And if your tricep flexes, your bicep has to relax. Otherwise you get lock arm. So by pushing in, not only does it stimulate your chest, it stimulates an element of your bicep which disengages biomechanically an element of your tricep. And your tricep is a big stabilizing muscle in this, or even a big prime mover. So when you then take that muscle out so much, then your chest has to pick up the slack and you actually target your chest.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Like I know, for example, we were talking earlier about strength curves and things like that, and ways to change it all. But if you're doing that, like Matt mentioned earlier, the weight you're going to be lifting is definitely going to be lower. Like you can't come in, using your ego.
Absolutely.
So if you come in ego lifting, trying to lift the biggest weights in the room or the heaviest weights, 100% you can't be isolating muscles, because there's no way you're going to hit your PBs and things like that if you're trying to isolate a muscle. And that's where you really, again, I can't say enough about the focus. You have to change your motivation, focus, goals, and understand you're going to be lifting lower weights, but for a greater gain in a particular area.
Absolutely. So like, remember, the mechanical advantage has its time. If you're trying to be a strength athlete, you're not going to use mechanical disadvantage. You're going to switch to the advantage to get the maximum weight, but you're not trying to isolate a particular muscle group. Your goal has now become lifting the maximum amount of weight you possibly can.
Absolutely.
So pick what works for you, and if it's hypertrophy, you don't necessarily want that advantage, because the number that you're lifting isn't as important as the damage you're doing in that target muscle.
Right. 100%. Time and place, always.
Absolutely.